Let's bring out what we've learned and practiced. As soon as he made up his mind and moved, his body moved on its own. He could see everything and respond to it. The countless days of training in the isolation technique provided the strength to support me.
It's working.
His body moved as he intended. He adhered to a single sword technique, the Northern-style heavy sword technique. Based on the fundamental principles divided into steady, heavy, and quick, it combined 5 basic forms developed throughout the continent. For example, Mitch Hurrier used a sword technique that combined steady and heavy with a touch of quick. Ragna emphasized heavy and added a hint of quick in his swordsmanship. This was the Northern-style heavy sword technique. Of course, what he learned was only the basics. It was a simple technique, but it was enough. Using the technique he honed as a foundation.
I can see it.
He could hear the enemy's attack forms with his eyes and see them with his ears. As his senses intertwined, he opened the gate of sixth sense, allowing him to see everything. He classified and distinguished the order of the incoming blades. He could perceive each and every one of them. The speed at which he felt and reacted was truly lightning fast.
Left from here.
Naturally, he had the luxury of thought. Enkrid was faster than the monsters and beasts surrounding him, saw them beforehand, and his body followed suit. He moved more. He advanced a step faster than his opponents and swung his sword one more time.
Strength.
The heart of great strength damages the body if the activation time is too long. So, it should be brief and momentary. Not only had he honed the sense of evasion during today's repeated practice, in the process of evading again and again, he naturally obtained this through training and practice. As his heart pounded, strength filled his muscles.
3 times, no, I can swing 4 times.
With one heartbeat, he could deliver 4 powerful strikes. All were cuts where he felt no resistance in his hands. It was a precise slash that split the heads of 4 gnolls, exactly dividing their crowns in half. His body moved as he wished. The sword advanced as he desired. The coordination of his body doubled all his reflex speeds, and as he unraveled everything he had learned, Enkrid thought of Rem at that moment. How could he run through the middle of the battlefield unscathed? How could such a feat be possible? With such skill it was possible, for someone like him now, cutting and cutting again, splitting and dividing, walking through the time he had seized and taken.
Ah.
He also recalled the junior knight he had seen then. How could he alone charge forward and demonstrate such power? They say you need will. They said it was something distant for Enkrid, but does that mean it's a reason to give up? Not a chance. With busy days filled with doing his best in what he could do now, there was no time for despair. Enkrid did just that. He did everything he could. Using his body, trained with the heart of great strength and the isolation technique, he imitated the charging technique of the junior knight. After rampaging like that, when his limbs started to tremble and a dull pain arose in his intestines, he suddenly retreated. Behind him, Luagane let out a strange sound. Enkrid felt his entire body's energy drain away. When he asked for help, Luagan wrapped a whip around his wrist and pulled him in. Enkrid collapsed into Luagane's arms and fainted. It was only natural since he showed strength similar to that of a junior knight even without will. However, those who watched him, those who climbed the fortress walls, Luagane, Finn, Kreis, and Esther, their chests were filled with an inexplicable fire, their skin with goosebumps, and their whole bodies with tremors.
How can any human do that?
It was a moment when, despite not being a bard, one wanted to compose a song.
Damn, we should name this wall after him.
A wall construction craftsman who had hit his head while carrying stones and had a scab said,
Just name it Enkrid's Wall without the madman part.
Damn it, why am I crying?
Some of the vigilantes were shedding tears. All of them, rather than feeling joy for their survival, were deeply moved by the sight of the man standing and fighting in front of them, for reasons they couldn't fully understand. The word impressive is often used to describe something that leaves a mark on the heart, something that engraves itself as a feeling or emotion. At this moment, Enkrid was etched into their hearts. Amidst the cheers and shouts, even as the gnolls had not fully retreated, they shouted,
Enkrid.
They chanted someone's name, shot arrows, and threw stones. Finally, the monsters retreated a step.
Is he okay?
Having seen him collapse, They all asked in unison. They hoped he wasn't hurt, that his body wasn't damaged, that he would come out fine and walk, and that they could see his smiling face. They all felt the same. They wanted to cheer for him. They wanted to give anything for him, this instant. Their expectations were fulfilled.
Is he gone?
Enkrid stood up and walked, asking. Deutsche Pullman descended from the barrier. After looking at the glaive in his hand a few times, as if he didn't like it, he tossed it aside. His subordinates would have been quite surprised to see this, as he valued his weapons like his life, typical of a mercenary. Kneeling down, Deutsche lowered his head and spoke. In those few words, the man's gratitude was fully conveyed.
It's probable keep moving forward.
Enkrid received the words calmly without any particular smile. Deutsche neither sought his smile, gratitude, nor praise. He merely expressed respect to the man who had stirred him. Seeing this, everyone else kneeled, whether they were on the wall or on the ground. Enkrid only shrugged his shoulders. Those who had watched him for a long time knew that he was quite content with the situation. After the battle, the kneeling and the glory had passed. Enkrid washed himself and returned to his hut to check his body. He had indeed pushed himself. His muscles were sore, and his heart felt a slight pressure.
At this level,
He had regulated himself. He would recover in a day. It was enough. Should he thank Auden anew?
the isolation technique is also a method that creates a regenerative body. The term regenerative body comes from the Far East or the Far North, referring to a body that recovers even if it breaks. This technique doesn't just end with restructuring the frame.
Auden had repeatedly emphasized that the isolation technique was ultimately about creating a foundation for the body to heal. He was reaping the benefits of it.
It's okay.
He clenched and unclenched his hands, assessing his condition. The soreness slowly faded between his trembling muscles.
Well, that was surprising.
Kreis said beside Enkrid. Everyone was watching him. It wasn't like he fainted for half a day after what he did. He had merely closed his eyes for a moment, and then got up and walked as if nothing happened.
I'm newly impressed.
Finn said. Esther just gazed at him steadily. Those eyes conveyed an uncertain meaning. Luagarn spoke matter-of-factly.
When this is over, I will leave.
She said it was time to return. She was bound by a promise as a frog and wasn't entirely free. Enkrid told her to do so.
Don't raise your speech with me. Don't use honorifics.
Then he added words filled with insistence. Enkrid nodded. He was busy preparing for tomorrow. He had used up all his whistling knives. If their opponent, the cultist, wasn't a fool, they wouldn't withdraw so easily. Seeing them retreat today, they'd come back again. They likely pulled back quickly to preserve their forces.
The ladders can be remade.
Seeing him push himself, they might try another attack.
Should I bait them?
Now that he had shown what he could do, he felt confident.
We need to catch the cultist, right?
He asked Luagarn. It was clear that leaving now would be problematic.
Of course.
Good, it seemed feasible. Kreis approached and whispered.
I think they'll come again tomorrow.
Kreis was a sharp guy with a quick mind. He was perceptive too.
I'm thinking of baiting them.
Ah, that sounds good.
With just a few words, Kreis quickly came up with a strategy that seemed likely to work. No, it seemed like it would definitely work. Kreis had a knack for instantly grasping the enemy's intentions and moving in a particular direction. They took a full day of rest. No one disturbed Enkrid. They couldn't relax entirely, as some of the retreating monsters were still within range. The only difference from the previous day was that there was a surge of morale.
Are we going to let those monsters take our village?
Something Enkrid had done ignited a fire in everyone's hearts. Before that fire could die down, the morning sun rose. The monsters brought makeshift ladders again. This time, they had prepared hooks tied to the ends of ropes. It looked like something made by binding tree trunks together. There weren't many, but they seemed like they could be quite effective weapons.
Bastards.
Deutsche ground his teeth. Enkrid opened the gate again, and he repeated the actions of the previous day. His body recovered just as it was said to create a regenerative body. With the isolation technique supporting his body, he managed without issue. They caused another uproar. As the name Slaughter of Monsters began to spread, after a short but intense battle, Enkrid coughed up blood. It was a clear sign that he had over-exerted himself for 2 days. Beside him, Luagarn deliberately showed an opening and had her left arm cut off. A knoll bit into the severed arm and lifted it. It seemed like a cry of victory. Though the monsters and beasts retreated once more, Enkrid was spitting blood, and Luagern had lost her left arm. On the third day, the monsters attacked again.
Aren't they getting tired of this?
As the shout from the mercenary atop the wall rang out, Enkrid once again stepped outside the fortress. Despite fighting and spitting blood, Enkrid lasted for an even shorter time than the day before retreating. Dark shadows began to form under his eyes. By now, the number of beasts had been halved. This meant that nearly 500 monsters had been cut down, slashed, or stabbed by Enkrid's hand. It was an incredible achievement in just 3 days, yet Enkrid eventually collapsed, his limbs hanging limp, and was carried back by the vigilantes. The number of arrows flying at them had also decreased. The wooden barricades held firm once more. It seemed that they only needed to hold out for 2 or 3 more days. The next day, with even darker circles under his eyes and a paler complexion, Enkrid stepped forward again. Though he seemed to be at the peak of exhaustion, he burned brightly like a candle, using his life force to light up his surroundings, and displayed ghost-like prowess once more.
Ugh, monster slayer.
The deep-voiced shout of a vigilante. Inspired by him, 20 vigilantes ran out and engaged in close combat. They fought in preparation for a retreat at the front of the barricade. Thanks to their efforts, there were no fatalities. It was still a close call, though. The barricades had taken more damage, and it seemed they would be at risk even without ladders. That day, Enkrid truly seemed like a monster slayer. He reduced the number of beasts by 100, just like on the first day. With fewer than 300 remaining, there were no ghouls left, and the number of beasts had significantly decreased. There were only about 200 gnolls, and fewer than 100 hyena beasts. So, the fourth morning dawned. The cultists thought they could wear them down to death. Of course, seeing Enkrid's exploits, they wanted to run away immediately.
A knight, at least a junior knight.
A knight was an unbeatable force, so fleeing was the right move. As they started to retreat, they noticed something lacking. They were supposed to be inhuman. Once, they almost died from an arrow thrown by a junior knight from over 50 paces away. The cultists knew their power well, but this was the frontier. What would a junior knight be doing here? There were no knights here. In the kingdom, there were at most 30 knights. Among them, only 1 or 2 could be called knights. They were strategic weapons, capable of changing the course of battles. The knights' forces were usually composed of junior knights, who could also change the course of battles. In the continent's battlefields, elite small forces were crucial.
But this is the frontier. Why would knights come here?
The knights weren't idle, so the opponent wasn't a knight or even a junior knight. He displayed incredible power, but retreated quickly. He repeated similar actions the next day, fighting desperately like a sorcerer with a pawned soul, disregarding his own life.
Can they withstand this?
The cultists endured. After several days of harassment, the enemy began to spit blood. Only a frog with a severed arm and villagers battered by arrows and stones remained. The cultists smiled in satisfaction. Now they would lead the beast horde to devour, chew, and consume everything. In doing so, they would fulfill the dream of unleashing monsters upon this land. This was how they would proclaim the will of their god. In the end, even if things escalated and knights or others arrived to destroy them, they would have already gained plenty from this place.
Let's go.
The cultist led the beasts. On the 4th morning, it was the day of reckoning. Previously, they hadn't aggressively rushed all the way to the log barricades, but now it was the endgame. The cultists directed the beasts to batter the barricades. On top of the barricade, a panther could be seen. It must be somewhere nearby. The panther had been by that madman's side all this time. It was only natural. Repeated circumstances create fixed ideas.
Come out, you scoundrel.
As they pounded on the barricades, a voice came from behind.
Christ was right indeed.
Startled, the cultist felt a chill down their spine. Turning quickly to look behind, they saw a man with dark circles under his eyes and a pale face along with the frog.
You were hard to find,
said the pale-faced man, wiping under his eyes with a finger. Something black smeared on his hand. The man who should have been coughing up blood and lying around seemed strangely vibrant, with clear and healthy-looking skin. Was this just a trick of the eye?
How was that friend's usual behavior?
To get a good grasp on a person, it's best to ask around in various places. Christ did just that. He started with Deutsche Pullman.
But I will keep moving forward. He was very friendly, like a tongue in the mouth, and meticulous. He wouldn't start anything unless he was sure about it.
He was considered a valuable asset before becoming part of the cult. He got along well with everyone, never making enemies, and his meticulousness was his greatest strength.
He was sneaky, both in his actions and the methods he used.
This was the opinion of Luagern.
Sneaky and cautious, not acting without certainty.
Even when gambling or making bets, he wouldn't step in unless he was sure.
But I was good at whatever he did. But, well, he tended to take a long time to prepare. The leader seemed to like that. His position in the battle formation? At the very back? Yes, always at the very back.
Now that you mention it, that's true.
Christ compiled the opinions of his fellow vigilantes and formed an image in his mind. In Christ's mind, the guy seemed like a petty goat. He had a rough sense of his habits as well.
If we're talking about personality, he's like Jackson.
Jackson could get things done, but he was meticulous and particular about various things. They're similar, though the other guy was dumber, much dumber. Christ crafted a script, one to draw out the sneaky and timid fellow. Specifically, it was a scenario designed to make him let his guard down.
How about coughing up some blood? You can use this.
It was a pouch made from a pig's bladder, filled with goat's blood. It smelled bad, but you didn't have to keep it in your mouth. Just let it drip out.
A little injury would be good. It's frog, so a bit of injury is fine, right?
Sure.
Luagern was intense. She came in with an arm completely severed.
This would be more effective. But are you okay with losing an arm?
I'm right-handed.
Was that an answer? Maybe. In any case, the opponent would see the severed arm and be sure of their victory, feeling relieved. Even so, the morale of their own side didn't waver, thanks to Enkrid. There was something shown that day amidst the monsters and beasts. It was truly impressive. Even Christ shouted out. This plan took everything into account.
This should be enough.
It would be good to steer the opponent's thoughts in one direction. You could call it a learning process.
They don't seem that smart.
People have habits. Hiding in the back is a habit, a routine. Could they abandon it just like that?
Not likely.
Pinpointing the enemy's location was quite easy for Kreis. He planted a preconceived notion in the enemy's mind by keeping Esther close to Enkrid. Where the panther was, Enkrid would be. Thus, at dawn, before the enemy noticed, Enkrid and Luagern were sent out.
Finn, put this on!
After dressing Finn in extra clothes, Kreis placed him and Esther atop the barrier in a spot that could be called a gallery. As the swarm of monsters and beasts anticipating victory charged in, Kreis could clearly see where the enemy was hiding. A place where he could stay hidden while watching his enemies. He'd probably be hiding behind monster hides. Reading the enemy's mind and using it to set traps was a simple and easy task. At least for Kreis it was.
Big Eyes is quite useful. It's not just about the face.
Luagern remarked, and Enkrid's jaw moved slightly up and down in agreement. As predicted, they found the guy disguised in a hyena hide at the spot Kreis mentioned. Enkrid wiped off the charcoal makeup mixed with water. He also brushed off the powdery stone dust sprinkled on his face. The gray dust dispersed from his hand. It was thick and uncomfortable. "You bastards, you've tricked me." Ah, such a stereotypical response. Every time Enkrid wanted to say a particular phrase, it was on the tip of his tongue.
The one who's fooled is the idiot.
The world had become so harsh and cunning that such stereotypical reactions had become rare. It was like a textbook conversation, something he hadn't experienced in a long time, and he felt a strange sense of satisfaction. "You scoundrels." The cultist was enraged, his eyes turning red. Several gnolls nearby reacted to the cultist's shout and rushed in. The cultist's hypnosis and illusion spells disrupted the monsters' minds. The gnolls showed no fear. If they had seen Enkrid's sword in action, they should have fled, but instead, they charged fearlessly. However, Enkrid didn't need to step in. Whoosh! Bang! Bang! Crack! Luagern's whip lashed out. The metal piece at the end crushed a gnoll's head, one of them blocked with a thick wooden shield. With a bang, part of the shield shattered, but the whip was blocked. It was a mutated gnoll. The creature behind the shield bared its fangs. As several mutated gnolls approached the cultist to shield him, Luagarn puffed up her cheeks.
Do you think you'll get away twice?
You, frog, don't you value your heart? You didn't realize I wasn't prepared then. It had a very long tongue. With that thought, Enkrid's hand moved. A beam of light flew. It wasn't a whistling dagger, so it was much slower, but it was thrown with the heart of great strength. It was fast. The dagger flew straight toward the cultist's forehead, just before it reached its target. A mutated gnoll extended its left arm and blocked the dagger. The blade embedded itself into the thick hide of the gnoll. Without any change in expression, the gnoll pulled the dagger out with its other hand and tossed it aside. Black blood flowed freely, and though it furrowed its brow for a moment, it merely glared at Enkrid.
That reaction speed.
Not bad. In fact, it was impressive. The gnoll's yellow eyes locked onto Enkrid, and Enkrid stared back. The cultist, though cautious, was not a fool. He realized that continuously controlling the monsters was a waste of his magical power. There was an easier way, appointing a leader among the colony. The previous leader had been a berserker wielding poisoned daggers, but this time it was the largest of the mutated gnolls. With the addition of a spell, it seemed as if a dark aura emanated from the new leader's shoulders.
It's a cultist's trick.
Luagarnez, implying they should be cautious. Enkrid drew his sword, gripping it with both hands and holding it upright as he faced the enemy. He kept both the dark aura and the cultist in his line of sight.
How will this turn out?
At some point, Enkrid had started to gauge his opponents by comparing them to Rem.
Are they like Rem?
Or perhaps,
Are they tougher than Rem?
or,
Is this better than facing Rem?
in conclusion,
Not a chance.
comparing them to Rem seemed almost insulting to that brute, so,
Cover the rear.
he said, then charged forward. The cultist was confident. He trusted his summoning skills. He believed in the leader gnoll as it charged, thinking that no matter how skilled the opponent was, the unexpected element, the newly appointed leader, was a wild card in his favor. Thus, the opponent standing before him now was another variable, an unforeseen asset. Meanwhile, Frog was rushing toward him. The cultist wanted to employ a strategy that guaranteed victory. He assessed that the one with the drawn sword was far more dangerous than Frog, who had only one arm remaining.
Give me you flesh.
Bones, the cultist did just that. A black, lump-like substance dropped from his right fingertips. It was darker and denser than a shadow, exuding an ominous aura. Warrior's arm. As the cultist murmured, the lump quickly took shape. It was a bizarre form, thin legs, one thick arm, and a headless human shape. The thick right arm wielded a blunt, sword-like object. Meanwhile, Luagarn swiftly approached, swinging her whip. It whistled through the air, aiming to crush the cultist's head. Block it, the cultist shouted, his eyes bloodshot. A mutated gnoll blocked the whip with its body. Luagarn flicked her wrist, and the whip coiled and twisted like a living snake over the dead gnoll's body, aiming again for the cultist's head. As the cultist twisted his body, the whip wrapped around his left arm, snapping the bones. Damn frog. Instead of screaming, the cultist bit his tongue, a thick stream of blood trickling down his mouth. As the blood was offered as a price, the cultist murmured, and the left arm, caught by the whip, fell off, melting into a dark liquid. You, dog of Hualin, the cultist shouted. The black liquid that had been his left arm transformed into a four-legged beast, larger than an average dog. The cultist felt his insides twist from summoning multiple creatures in quick succession. His stomach churned, and his vision spun. Additionally, the loss of his left arm caused blood to pour out.
Damn.
He was on the verge of death. Swallowing the blood pooling in his mouth, the cultist managed to regain his composure, and then he grinned at the sight before him. Frog was fighting the beast he had summoned. On the other side, the half-witted junior knight, using strange techniques, was almost within reach of the warrior's arm.
I've won.
The cultist was confident of his victory. Luagarne, facing the summoned beast, wrapped the whip around her wrist. Her whip grew stronger as it shortened. The opponent was hiding their true strength. The summoned creatures were trickier than she had anticipated. They were fast, had sharp fangs, and despite having no eyes, could dodge attacks well. This wasn't an opponent to be easily taken down with a single strike. The fact that the opponent could summon two creatures simultaneously indicated that this cultist was exceptional among his peers.
Just hold on.
That would be enough. Frog drew her prepared weapon. When traveling alone, the most challenging foes were spirit-type monsters, ghosts and evil spirits. The summoned creatures controlled by the cultist were similar in form. They were entities physically manifested in this world through summoning. There were many ways to deal with them, but she preferred a simple approach. For instance,
Burn.
she seemed to be using a simple magical tool. Soon, blue flames ignited along her whip. Naturally, this was a kind of spell, something meant to effectively strike the summoned creature. She didn't know. The cultist was using his life force to control the summoned creatures. She just thought he was sending a hindrance toward Enkrid and a troublesome creature toward her. Meanwhile, the warrior's arm, with its thin legs, dashed forward, closing in on Enkrid. It was right there. Enkrid had just parried a descending club with his sword, held in both hands, and slashed forward, cutting deep into the creature's abdomen. Rip! Despite the deep cut enough to expose its innards, the gnoll seemed to ignore the pain, swinging its club wildly. Enkrid ducked and bent his knees, avoiding the attack. The club whooshed past his head. He then smoothly drew his sword back, cutting the tendons behind the creature's knees. Crossing his left and right legs, he moved behind the creature, slashing twice across its calf muscles. Slash, slash! That was enough. With its calf muscles severed, the creature fell to its knees. Twisting his body, Enkrid executed a spinning slash with the sword. The gnoll's head was severed and flew through the air. It died without even being able to scream properly. The movements hadn't been seamless. Each action was adapted to the situation at hand, but he fought as if he was facing Rem. Enkrid found this easier than fighting multiple opponents. The battle was swift, and the difference in skill was clear. As he severed the gnoll's calves, the dark figure and sword sent by the cultist approached. By the time he decapitated the gnoll, the summoned creature swung its shadowy, black sword. This was the cultist's last desperate move, a deadly final strike. The warrior's arm was a summoning spell designed to vanish after delivering a single fatal blow. It was a spell used when one wanted to ensure the death of an opponent. Seeing the thin-legged creature charge at him, Enkrid raised his sword. The black sword slashed down from above. It was incredibly fast, a sudden acceleration. There was no way to avoid it. Enkrid had envisioned blocking this attack after killing the gnoll, so he raised his sword to block and deflect, just as the cultist had hoped. The warrior's arm would ignore physical defenses, delivering a fatal blow to the human spirit. The cultist's eyes gleamed with anticipation, even as he bled from his mouth and arm.
Die.
Soon Enkrid's sword met the blade swung by the warrior's arm. Esther watched Enkrid's fight from atop the fortress wall. The cultist's spell was a crude trick. However, even such a crude attempt could be fatal to someone unprepared. Knowing this, how could she just let the man go? She tore off pieces of her old leather armor, adding her magic to it. This was a substitute, a gift.
This is a gift, man.
Esther infused some of her magic into the man's sword, so that it would react if the opponent tried any spell-like trickery. Enkrid saw a faint blue glow emanating from his sword. It was a brief moment in time. The glowing blue sword shattered the black sword, slicing the black mass in half. If it were a human, it would have been a clean cut below the chest. He felt the sensation of cutting through it in his hands. Was there some kind of flesh inside that form? The sliced black mass exuded billowing black smoke before dissipating. Seeing this, the cultist's eyes widened as if they would tear apart.
What is that?
Enkrid was honest. He was also a bit bewildered. Not overly so, but after a few moments of thought, Enkrid opened his mouth.
I don't know either.
This response made the cultist's head heat up. To speak as if something significant was coming, only to say such nonsense. As his emotions were rattled, the cultist's vision began to spin. Suddenly he couldn't breathe. Having pushed himself beyond his limits, his heart seized up. Sometimes, death is anticlimactic. The cultist clutched his chest, gasping for air before collapsing forward. The sight of him hitting the ground face first was far from dignified. As he fell, the fog clouding the minds of the monsters and beasts around him lifted. They had instincts, too. The moment they saw the humans who had killed their kind, they all scattered in different directions. The colony had fallen apart. Meanwhile, Enkrid was carefully examining his sword.
Is this a magic sword?
So was that border guard blacksmith a magician? It didn't seem likely. It was an odd combination.
Really, come whenever, anytime you want, or even if you don't want to come. No, come. Are you married? That's good too, great. So anytime you want to come and settle down here, that's good. My daughter is quite pretty, so living together, well, that's good. Right?
The village chief, clearly drunk, repeated himself for what seemed like the 19th time, asking the person beside him who was just as drunk and nodding vigorously in agreement. As he nodded, bits of food scattered from his bushy beard.
Yes, it's great.
He looked obviously drunk. The village chief seemed to be losing his senses due to the alcohol. Enkrid had briefly seen the chief's daughter. He knew she wasn't even 15 yet. She was just a child. While early marriages were customary in the West, they weren't in the central regions. So, what the chief was saying was just drunken nonsense.
Ha 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 ha.
The chief and the man with the scraggly beard, carrying a lunchbox, walked away arm in arm. Enkrid watched them silently. Whenever a village overcomes a crisis, a festival always follows. When the blacksmith of the border guard, whether a wizard or not, tried to kill a cultist, Luagarn had shaken his head. When questioned as to why they should spare the cultist, Luagarna replied,
He's already dead. It's stopped.
The cultist had died of a heart attack. The remaining monsters fled once they realized what had happened. Although a few monsters tried to attack, Enkrid didn't need to intervene. An arrow flew and pierced the head of the remaining monster.
We won. We protected it.
Shouts and cheers of joy filled the air, and amidst these cries, Enkrid heard his name.
Enkrid.
It seemed the entire village now knew and was calling his name. The voices of the people he had protected and those who had seen his actions. Feeling not bad at all, Enkrid sheathed his sword and turned away. Through the cheers, through the people. It was time to return to the village that was just beginning to wake up.
Long live Enkrid's wall.
A strange phrase echoed. It was something the chief had strongly suggested, and even the head of the guards, who was also going to become a key figure in the city's future, agreed that the name was appropriate.
A wall with a name.
Well, honestly, it wasn't a bad idea. It was half-jokingly suggested after all. That was the night they drove away the monsters and beasts. The chief spread out all the remaining food in the village, and everyone ate and drank together. Enkrid did the same. He ate, drank, and enjoyed himself.
Want a drink?
He took a sip from the drink Finn handed him, and it tasted good. It was apple wine with a sweetness and slight acidity that blended perfectly with the distinct flavor of the alcohol, filling his mouth with flavor.
Isn't it good?
The man had a scraggly beard that looked like it had been chewed by a rat. The man, whose face and name Enkrid didn't know, smiled sheepishly and asked again how it was. Enkrid nodded.
It's good.
It's my pride.
The man with the rat-chewed beard puffed out his chest. He seemed to be a brewer.
I had been saving this, but I'll give it to you.
Though his tone was rough, the sentiment behind it was not. He expressed his gratitude.
Thanks to you.
He handed Enkrid a bottle of apple wine, which he said was different from what others were drinking. With a pop, Enkrid opened the bottle and took a sip. It was different. The flavor, the taste, the aroma, everything was different. The scent of apples tickled his nose, and the taste grew richer the more he savored it. The sweet taste that wrapped around his tongue kept him sipping. Enkrid had never tasted a drink like this before in his life.
This seems like a special wine.
I was saving it for my daughter's wedding.
It was a wine with its own history. Enkrid wondered if it was okay to drink such a precious wine.
I still have one bottle left.
The man said, smiling brightly. Despite his rat-like beard, his smile was genuinely pure. There was a glimpse of pure joy.
Here, you should introduce yourself too.
The brewer quickly brought his wife over. She was beautiful. They say skilled men attract beautiful women, and it seemed to be true in this case.
Enjoying the drink?
Enkrid nodded and continued to savor the apple wine. Around him the village chief, Deutsche Pullman, and many others sat and rose beside Enkrid. A large festival-like gathering was taking place in the center of the village.
Let's commemorate this day every year. Shall we call it Enkrid Day?
Do they plan to name everything after me?
What's in a name?
Someone retorted, and others nodded in agreement. They decided to celebrate the start of summer every year from today. Would they really do it? Enkrid watched passively while sipping his apple wine. The village chief, drunk, repeated the same words. The chief's wife said that in 2 years, their daughter would become a beauty who could captivate the city, but
That seems unlikely.
she was just an ordinary child. The child was too shy to even speak to Enkrid. In her place, a cheeky little kid approached Enkrid, asking to join his ranks.
Go and capture 5 of Deutsche Pullman's vigilantes.
Enkrid told the kid. The kid, with a determined look, replied,
I will.
Then he tried to tackle a drunken vigilante, only to get a tap on the head and burst into tears. Trying to act grown-up, the kid ran away crying. He was still a child who probably wet the bed. He was cheeky, though. In a world where life was harsh without even such dreams, Enkrid secretly wished him well.
Thanks to you.
Deutsche Pullman seemed to have a strong tolerance for alcohol. He didn't seem to get drunk easily. His nose was a little red, but his speech wasn't slurred. He silently took a few sips from his cup.
They said they didn't have anything like this for me.
The brewer cursed and said,
If you ever need a glaive, just call. I'll dance on the blade and swear an oath.
It was a mercenary's oath, a commitment to respond to any call no matter what. Dancing on the blade, a poetic expression for a greeting.
Dancing on the blade.
For the first time in a long while, Enkrid returned the mercenary greeting. With a simple farewell, Deutsche stood up. Enkrid took another sip of the apple wine. Despite having a few drinks, Enkrid's mind remained clear. He didn't feel the urge to pick up a sword and swing it wildly. He had already replayed the fight in his mind enough.
Rest is important, brother.
Auden's words came to mind. Enkrid agreed with that sentiment. Rest was always important. If there was one rare day of rest in a year, today seemed like a good candidate for it. With that in mind, Enkrid continued to drink and eat. A skilled hunter-turned-vigilante had brought a deer and roasted it whole. The preparation was excellent. The meat was tender, and there was hardly any gamey smell. The seasoning was just right.
Whew, who would believe it if I told them about this when we go back?
Finn, moderately drunk, approached and spoke.
About what?
The monster slayer, the dance of the madmen with dual swords.
Though only when drunk, Finn seemed to have the qualities of a bard. Chuckling, Finn moved on to another spot. Kreis, also visibly drunk, approached and poked Enkrid in the side. Enkrid had noticed him approaching and poking, but he let it happen.
Let's go treasure hunting.
Sure.
No, really, let's go. Do you think I'm going to keep it all to myself? No, really, I'm serious. You never believe what I say.
Okay, let's go.
There's a place less than half a day from here. I've planned everything, including how to get in. Traps, no problem.
Sounds good.
Don't you think it's time to decide?
Kreis's eyes were blazing with excitement. Who gave him so much to drink? As Enkrid looked at the moon and sipped his apple wine, Kreis blinked his big eyes a few times and then asked,
But what did you say earlier?
Ask tomorrow's you after you've sobered up.
What?
It means get lost.
At first, people crowded around Enkrid, but now they had moved away, mingling among themselves. Watching this, Enkrid thought it looked pleasant. The moonlight shone down. The temperature was comfortable, not too hot. It wasn't yet the season for swarms of insects. The northern part of the continent typically didn't have many bugs. There was delicious apple wine, deer barbecue, and special foods brought out from each house. Cheese and smoked meats were served. It might seem like they were indulging in their supplies, but given the circumstances, it wasn't a problem. They had eliminated the threat to the village. The bodies of the cultists and monsters were laid out outside the village. The equipment used in the battle was sold by the village to Krona for a fair price. Starting tomorrow, they will have an even busier day. They needed to clean up the bodies, repair the damaged walls, and bring stones from the quarry. They would also recruit villagers to expand the village. Would they absorb the surrounding small villages? That was usually the case. That's how pioneer villages grew. Skilled people would be brought in, even if they had to be paid well. That's how this village would eventually turn into a town. Building proper walls and something resembling an inner castle, how long would that take? Without a wizard's help and relying only on the craftsman's guild,
It would still take a few years.
and considering the need to build a mansion and various other factors, it might take even longer. However, the village chief was enthusiastic. so he would likely find a way to make it happen. Given the land was overrun with monsters and beasts, it would be hard to receive trade goods,
Everything will have to be quick and efficient.
and that would work. Enkrid looked up with these idle thoughts. In the center of the village square there was noise all around. Some were singing, others were playing the lute. That person seemed to know how to play quite well. Listening attentively and watching the stars in the sky, he thought they looked like someone wielding a sword.
Are you curious about how to gain willpower?
It was Luagarni. She sat beside him and asked Enkrid, who did not turn his head. Enkrid did not answer. Luagarn spoke again to Enkrid.
Why don't you ask?
Only then did Enkrid slowly open his lips.
You'll know when the time comes.
Was he being laid back? That didn't seem to be the case. From what Luagarne had seen, this man wasn't one to be relaxed. Luagarne didn't know why she felt a sense of urgency, but she suddenly felt a desire to share the information. It wasn't the first time. She had felt this way the entire time. Unable to hold back, she had spoken, but seeing Enkrid's calm response, she felt a bit annoyed.
Do you think you can become a knight?
I don't know.
Another deflating response. It was an uncharacteristic answer. Enkrid, still looking at the moon, continued.
A dream, just a dream.
Short, but a sharp knife that cuts straight to the heart. Enkrid's words had that effect. Luagarn placed a hand over his chest armor. His left arm was still regenerating, so she was effectively one-armed. She felt a tightness in her chest muscles.
A squire uses willpower in a different way. They randomly invoke willpower in 1 or 2 actions. Even that is not an easy feat, but achieving that is what could be called the realm beyond limits, the land beyond mastery.
Why was this frog suddenly talking about this? Was it because of the moonlight or the apple wine?
Do frogs get drunk?
Sometimes, but not now.
Luagarn, being straightforward, spoke her mind.
Right now, I think I'm intoxicated by a man.
There was no need to ask who that man was, and Luagarn did not expect an answer.
Squire Asia was obsessed with the will that creates momentum.
A knight is someone who can properly use willpower. Squires are those who can use it to some extent.
Even among squires who have partially grasped willpower, many never become knights. Yet, do you still want to become a knight?
Was this explanation to ask this question? Either way, it was helpful. Enkrid silently nodded.
Yes, you will become a knight.
A dream once shattered, Enkrid had mended and stitched it back together. It was now within reach again. Luagarne looked at Enkrid intently. On the surface, there seemed to be no visible passion, but having observed Enkrid, Luagarne could see it.
A stubborn man.
He harbored a fierce flame within that he did not show outwardly. Because of this, he was admirable. Because of this, he was impressive.
If you become a knight, I'll fall in love with you.
For frogs, reproduction and love are separate matters, so they could love humans. Moreover, a frog's concept of love was different from that of humans. Not just different, but an entirely separate concept. For them, the concept of restraint or physical love does not exist. It is perfectly acceptable for a man they like to meet other women. In fact, they would even inform the woman of their presence and seek understanding. It was very rare for a human to receive the love of a frog. It was something special, a rare occurrence. Enkrid, unsure of what to make of this, looked at Luagarne and then nodded.
Do as you wish.
A nonchalant answer, showing his capacity and attitude. Luagarn liked that about him. As the two shared a drink under the moonlit scenery, a panther suddenly appeared between them. The panther looked as if it knew how to drink.
Want some?
Enkrid asked. Esther, the panther, opened its mouth. The precious apple wine was poured into the panther's mouth. With a gulp, the panther swallowed a sip of the wine and growled softly.
Good?
In response to Enkrid's question, the panther simply opened its mouth again. In the kingdom of Norilia, nobles often named their troops after themselves. Thus, the Viscount's army of Bentra arrived in front of the frontier village. A portion of the cavalry, having received urgent orders, arrived first, only to witness an unexpected sight.
They said they were under attack?
Asked the cavalry commander, who had gone out on scouting. What are they doing? Why are they burying bodies in the ground? The black blood of monsters and beasts could, contrary to its appearance, enrich the soil. The poison in a ghoul's claws could be neutralized and disappear when buried in the earth. For these reasons, the villagers were putting all their effort into burying the corpses of the monsters. The land in the wilderness had become uneven. Most of the villagers were sweating profusely, wielding shovels and pickaxes. Soldiers and villagers worked together as if they were one body.
Yes, the message we received was urgent.
The lieutenant said. It was more than just an urgent message. Large colony, Knoll horde, immediate support requested. That's what said. It was so urgent that there was no mention of the scale or number of enemies. Indeed, the urgency was evident. The message sender, Deutsche, didn't specify the number of monsters, only hinting that there were at least several hundred in the large colony and mentioning cultists. It was enough to mobilize those who sensed the danger.
It looks like they're farming with monster carcasses,
remarked the cavalry commander. It really didn't seem like there was any threat. If not for the monster corpses, the scene would have been quite pastoral. Most of the work was nearly done, so the number of monsters didn't seem that large.
He, boom, cut 500 all alone, name the wall, Enkrid.
They were even singing a nonsensical work song.
Find out more,
the commander ordered. Covered in dust, they had rushed over, only to find this. At the commander's order, one of the subordinates rode off to investigate. After surveying the situation, the subordinate returned and reported.
What? He single-handedly cut down 500 gnolls.
The villagers were straightforward.
What, is he a legendary free knight? Or did the mercenary king himself come? No, they say he's just a platoon leader from the border guard.
An ordinary platoon leader had apparently cut down 500 gnolls. Though it wasn't something done in a single day, they said. They also mentioned that cultists had been killed, or rather had died. They had tricked the cunning foe and struck him from behind, causing him to clutch his hearts and die. Are cultists like some petty thieves wandering the hills? Cowards with small guts?
Ridiculous.
The commander scoffed. What kind of ordinary platoon leader could do such a thing?
Really? Well then, let's see the face of that bastard,
the commander said as they entered the village.
He's already left,
the village chief said, stepping forward to speak for the group.
Already? It was supposed to be a mission to deal with the colony.
And then he just up and left like that. The cavalry commander sneered for the second time. With the current situation, the only witnesses were mercenaries and villagers. While it wasn't likely they were all lying, it was also hard to believe everything they said was entirely true.
When people are cornered, they tend to exaggerate.
The commander knew this well. People standing on the edge often feel like they're going to fall even if they have a few steps of space left. These people must be the same. 500? At most, it was probably 50, maybe 100. If a mercenary couldn't deal with a monster colony of that size, it would reflect poorly on their abilities.
They must have exaggerated.
The commander decided he had no intention of digging up the buried bodies to check.
Whatever.
As long as the village was intact, that was enough. Though he overheard nonsense about the Enkrid wall and other such things, it wasn't his concern.
Whether it's 50 or 5.
It was a fact that this platoon leader had saved the village. However, leaving behind an inflated reputation wasn't something he appreciated.
If we ever meet again,
he thought. Perhaps he'd knock the guy down a peg or two, maybe even cut that boastful tongue in half. With that thought, the commander turned his horse around.
It would have been nice if you stayed longer.
The village chief quickly expressed regret upon hearing that they were leaving. It was the morning 2 days after a night that resembled a festival. As Enkrid was washing off the sweat, a few women from the village came to see him.
He's got a good body. He's handsome. He's a good fighter. He has a good character. He's solid, surely even down there.
The last comments seemed to cross a line, but it was spoken with admiration, respect, and reverence. It didn't feel bad. He simply enjoyed the attention. When he mentioned he was leaving, Deutsche Pullman approached and offered him a glaive.
Would you care to spar with me?
Despite the abruptness of the request, the tone carried respect, and the attitude showed admiration. It was a straightforward and upright request, more like a favor. Most importantly,
those eyes.
Enkrid liked eyes like those, burning and intense.
Sure.
It was a simple sparring match. Enkrid deflected the glaive twice, once vertically and once horizontally, then moved in and landed a left punch to where Deutsche's lungs were. With a grunt, Deutsche collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. After catching his breath, Deutsche spoke. He then stood up and bowed his head. Enkrid nodded nonchalantly. Since there was no reason to delay, they decided to move on immediately.
Let me come along.
Finn said, who insisted on joining despite being advised to stay and recover in the village.
I'm a ranger.
She said, which carried a lot of meaning. As a member of a group whose motto was range go first, she didn't want to be left behind. It wasn't stubbornness. She wasn't fatally wounded, and her treatment, handled by Kreis, was excellent. Kreis was a versatile friend, skilled at many things, though perhaps not as much in combat, especially when it came to using his head. Moreover, there wasn't likely to be much danger in their journey now. At most, they might encounter some monsters and beasts. When a colony forms, most monsters in the surrounding area are typically wiped out. It's a natural occurrence because a colony means monsters have gathered to form a group, and since they had dealt with that group, encountering another large group of monsters would be unlikely.
Should be fine.
It's a treasure! A treasure!
Kreis murmured cheerfully, as if reciting a poem. According to him, the location indicated by the treasure map was just a day's journey away.
It's nothing really. It might have been complicated in the past needing to disarm traps, but now if you've read the guide to clearing the dungeons of Christrown, it's no big deal.
He seemed confident, and indeed it wasn't a big deal. After packing some preserved food and a few bottles of apple cider, they set out.
Come back, you must.
The village chief said, bowing his head behind them. In fact, it wasn't just the chief. All the villagers came out and bowed their heads. Enkrid nodded and said,
If I get the chance.
It was a simple farewell, but the sincerity made it genuine. Thus they set off on a journey that would end with finding a treasure and returning.
Let's go find some treasure!
Kreis chatted away excitedly. Enkrid nodded in agreement.
Let's go together up to that point.
Luagern didn't leave right away. Whether it was because she didn't need to return immediately or had some lingering attachment, he didn't bother to ask. Instead, she suggested
A spar.
he treated her the same as usual. She had mentioned being impressed by him, but that was something to observe over time. For Enkrid, learning from her was more important than any future prospects. While he believed he could surpass Luagern in sheer combat power if it came to killing, her experience and skills were genuine. In terms of combat strength, she was more formidable than he initially thought. Before reaching the peak, one can't see the surrounding landscape, but once atop, the view and understanding change. Now, he could see the path to surpassing Luagern. Are all frogs like this? He wondered. It wasn't the case. As she had said many times, she was a scholar.
Not a bad proposition. I've gotten a bit rusty myself. I should spend some time training again.
She, too, seemed to have learned something from their encounters with the cultists. With the sound of wooden swords clashing, they walked along the path. They reflected on what they had gained, learned, and practiced.
You're really an extraordinary human.
Luagern remarked after a bout of wooden swordplay.
No talent should be capable of this.
She continued.
Is that so?
Enkrid brushed it off casually. His dream was to become a knight, and there were still many mountains to climb and roads to walk. One step forward was not enough for him, even if he reached his dream. Would he be satisfied? That remained to be seen. Becoming a knight wouldn't be the end. His dream remained, and the reasons for pursuing it had accumulated in his heart during his travels across the continent, some as regrets, others as lingering desires.
The most extraordinary thing is your attitude right now.
Luagern continued, but Enkrid remained unchanged. He focused on learning and practicing. That quenched his inner thirst, and now he was simply quenching it and moving forward.
Again.
It was still the same. After another round of sparring, they drank a mix of water and apple cider to quench their thirst. They continued along the path that didn't follow the stream. Finn led the way, with Kreis chattering beside him.
According to the map, the terrain should be just like this. What do you think, Finn?
Seems about right.
Finn replied. Kreis had a knack for shining when his life and that of Krona were on the line. He could find his way by looking at just a part of the map, with Finn helping beside him.
Isn't that more surprising?
There were others like Big Eyes, Rem, Ragna, Auden, and Jackson. The Madmen platoon. They fit the name well. Compared to them, maybe he was the normal one? Being driven to work hard because of a big dream should be within acceptable limits. Of course, this was only Enkrid's perspective. Luagern wasn't the only one surprised by Enkrid's performance against the gnolls. Esther was astonished too.
A crazy human.
She had seen people change overnight many times before, but this was different, cutting down hundreds of monsters without any magic spells? Did he wield some sort of magical weapon? Had he picked up a cursed sword? No, everything was the same as usual, his sword and armor. The only thing that had changed was the person. This could almost be considered the strength of a quasi-knight. Even if the raw strength was unknown, the results spoke for themselves. Kreis was surprised too, but he didn't dwell on it.
He's the platoon leader after all.
He was already considered crazy, a man obsessed with swords. It was plausible for someone like that. It was pointless to ponder incomprehensible matters. Kreis didn't waste his energy on such thoughts and simply accepted it. The most surprised was Finn.
How is this possible?
When she first saw him, he didn't seem this strong. She was shocked then, seeing Enkrid fight among werewolves and later kill a wizard. Back then, it felt within the realm of understanding.
But now,
it seemed like he was pushing the limits of human ability, or even exceeding them. Most astonishing was his recovery ability.
he puts frogs to shame.
He fought to the brink of death and then came back the next day, ready to fight again. There wasn't even a priest by his side pouring out divine power. How was this possible? Finn tried to figure it out, but eventually gave up. Most who witnessed Enkrid eventually gave up trying to understand him. It was an inevitable conclusion.
He's a strange fellow.
Luagarn murmured, echoing the thoughts of many.
Is that so?
Enkrid remained indifferent. On their short journey, they didn't encounter any monsters or beasts. They reached a place behind a rocky mountain after a day of travel, which could have been covered in half a day if they had hurried. They had sparred, eaten, and rested sufficiently along the way. It wasn't urgent, as Christ said, it was just about picking up treasure along the way. The area behind the rocky mountain had scattered stones, short grass, and a few trees poking through. It wasn't exactly a plain, nor a wilderness, nor a rocky field.
Captain, did you know?
Know what?
Christ suddenly spoke up in this setting. Christ crossed his arms and continued speaking with a gleam in his eyes.
Dolph, the one who created the treasure map, did so in the past.
Wondering what kind of nonsense this was, Enkrid looked at him. Christ had a confident smile on his face. It was an irritating look, but there was nothing he could say, so he just stared at him.
So this method didn't exist back then.
As times changed and years passed, treasure hunters became more cunning. Among the tasks of dismantling traps and entering dungeons to gain rewards, they began to skip the tedious process of disabling traps and focused solely on the result. This concentrated approach was known as the Guide to Clearing the Dungeons of Crystron.
It's called the retreating technique.
It was a shortcut, but if it worked, it was a great method, as even Enkrid had experienced firsthand. If defeating the Knoll leader was a hurdle, they wouldn't wait for him or sacrifice the village unnecessarily, nor would they choose a disadvantageous battleground. They found a way to overcome it.
This is it!
Christ found a rock the size of an adult man and said,
Please, Luagarne.
At his words, Frog stepped forward without hesitation. As she pushed the rock, it toppled over with a thud, revealing an old hole underneath. Christ took a shovel out of his backpack and dug a few times before saying,
This is the entrance, roughly.
Then he walked briskly. As the candle burned down to about a finger's length, Christ wandered around the area with a smile on his face again.
It should be around here!
Christ started digging the ground with the shovel. It was a tough job to do alone.
Let me help.
This time, Enkrid took the shovel and started digging. The plan was to bypass all the traps and dig directly into the area where the treasure was hidden. It wasn't exactly a novel idea, but back in the day, when Dolph created the dungeon, it might have been unthinkable. It was a shortcut, but it was much more efficient than disarming the traps and risking their lives. Enkrid agreed and helped. As Esther wandered around, her claws extended, Enkrid shook his head.
Take a rest.
The panther, looking visibly tired, made a hissing sound.
Kya.
The panther seemed pleased with those words and found a spot to lie down. Curling up, it closed its eyes. It really did look tired. He had carried her in his arms on the way here, except when he sparred. She seemed exhausted from the journey. Anyway, Christ was right.
If we find some treasure along the way, we can pick it up and leave. Although it might not be there. Someone could have taken it without the map, but that's unlikely.
This was the third time he'd downplayed the situation. As they dug, the soil crumbled and fell inward, revealing a man-made passage.
See?
Christ said. The result of alternating shoveling with Enkrid. A few gold coins rolled around inside the hole, reflecting light. It was dark further inside, but there were probably more than just a few gold coins. Just as Christ said, it was easy.
Wow.
Finn's eyes sparkled. Christ had promised her some of the treasure, meaning Finn could take a few bags of krona. Luagarn and Esther weren't interested, but Enkrid thought it would be good to have some krona because his sword was damaged. Going down to pick up the treasure and returning was still an easy task. It should have been. It was supposed to be an easy task. The sun was setting, and the moon had risen by now. Christ glanced at the moon and then spoke.
Let's all go together. It wouldn't be bad to stay for a day. We might have a lot to carry.
There shouldn't be any danger. There were no beasts around, and they wouldn't be staying inside for more than a day. The sun was already setting, and since they needed to camp, it would be good to spend the night inside if it wasn't dangerous. Crace spoke with all this in mind. Instead of dealing with annoying insects, it was better to stay inside and move out tomorrow. Everyone agreed.
That's a good idea.
Enkrid agreed, thinking there might be something else besides a few gold coins.
Is there anything valuable?
He didn't lack krona, but his sword was too damaged from the recent battle. Especially the one made of Valyrian steel and Noir mountain wrought iron had chipped badly. Besides needing to sharpen the blade, the core was also damaged.
This won't do.
For a mercenary, a weapon is life. A swordsman who doesn't understand the value of their weapon is wrong from the start. Enkrid knew how to assess the condition of his weapon. He had cut through hundreds of beasts and monsters. It would be strange if the sword was still intact. Both swords had their cores damaged. His armor was also torn in several places. The leather parts were ripped, and there were holes in the chainmail underneath. Thinking this, he glanced to the side and saw Luagarne moving casually.
Looks like we'll be delayed in returning.
When Enkrid spoke, Luagarn puffed out her cheeks and replied with a huff.
It's fine. It's actually fun.
The atmosphere was cheerful. Enkrid gave Esther some seasoned jerky, while Finn tied a rope to a sturdy tree. The ranger's knotting technique shone through.
It won't come undone unless it's cut, and it's not too difficult to climb.
It was a precautionary measure, typical of a ranger. They let the rope dangle down the hole they'd prepared. Enkrid went down first, followed by Finn, then Chryse. Esther jumped down, digging her claws into the wall to slow her descent. Finally, Luagarn wrapped her legs around the rope and descended gracefully. Once they were all down, the moon had risen.
Is it around midnight?
Enkrid thought to himself.
It'll be perfect if we camp down here and head up tomorrow.
Chryse said from behind. Enkrid nodded. There could still be some danger, so he lit a torch and examined the surroundings. There was a long passage leading to the entrance Chryse had found, but it was so narrow they would have to stoop to get through.
If we go through there, our backs will give out.
Not that it would happen, but it was that narrow. Fighting in such a place would be difficult.
A bad place to use a sword.
Enkrid concluded. There didn't seem to be any other dangers. Everyone had the same thought. There wasn't much dust and no traps that triggered when stepped on. Esther yawned lazily with a low growl. Seeing how tired she still seemed, Enkrid held her in his arms and handed the torch to Chryse. Luagarn murmured to herself while looking around.
These are old traces.
What might she be like as a scholar? Enkrid also drifted into idle thoughts.
She knows ancient languages and is a talent appraiser for the kingdom.
Frog was versatile, and her value couldn't be low. Finn, who was checking the passage, found no danger. Though not on the level of a treasure hunter, Ranger Finn could spot traps.
Everything seems intact.
If there were traps she couldn't detect, they would either be magical or quite sophisticated. Not the basic kind that triggers arrows, but the kind that activates with the slightest touch. Such traps would be hard to notice unless one was a professional treasure hunter.
It's a bit much for a wealthy individual to create such traps.
Traps of that sort would typically be found in ancient tombs, often involving magic. Finn noticed Chryse walking alongside her, picking up a few gold coins from the floor and scanning the surroundings with the torchlight. Up until then, nothing unusual had happened. No danger, no particular events. The passage was short, leading to a round chamber. There, at the end of the dungeon, stood an altar with an old, worn chest. On the altar was a sword covered in dust. It looked either antique or simply ancient.
We've made it!
Chryse remarked. Chryse couldn't contain his excitement. They had dug in the right place and found the correct path. At this point, could he be considered a treasure hunter? Reading Guide to Clearing the Dungeons of Crystron had been a wise choice. Since learning to read as a child, Kreis had often sought out and read various books. He believed that knowledge would be the key to escaping the poverty of his childhood. And he was right. Now they had found treasure.
Do you really need that much krona to open a salon?
Enkrid asked, his question seeming frivolous.
Yes, absolutely.
Kreis replied without hesitation. Really? Enkrid's eyes seemed to ask. Kreis, seizing the moment, shared his long-held dream.
I'm going to establish the most luxurious and splendid establishment in the capital, a place everyone would want to enter. There will be membership cards too, and that's not the end. I'll open branches across the continent.
The eyes of someone pursuing a dream always burn with passion. Enkrid, who had no right to mock another's dreams and appreciating the gleam in Kreis's eyes, simply encouraged him.
Sure, go for it.
Apart from the old sword stuck in the middle of the altar, there were only 2 chests, which didn't seem particularly special. Seeing gold coins scattered in the passage suggested there might be something more here. With anticipation, Kreis approached the chests, cautious of potential traps, like those that might release poison arrows. Behind Kreis, Luagern offered Enkrid advice worth more than gold coins.
Basic skills alone won't be enough. You need to learn proper Joel swordsmanship and internalize it, then you can advance further.
Like what?
You learned northern-style swordsmanship from that guy, right?
Frog's keen eye had caught this. After seeing Ragna and Enkrid, she deduced the origin. Enkrid nodded in agreement and Frog continued.
It would be good if you could properly learn northern-style swordsmanship from that blonde with red eyes.
And you can't teach me.
I am bound by a covenant. This was an exceptional leave. I have to return.
Luagern said, genuinely conveying her regret. A covenant. Frog is easily swayed by desires and wants. Because of this, they made a vow of the heart. They often avoided using the word heart, replacing it with the 2 characters for covenant. Thus, a frog's covenant was not something light. It was a rule that had to be adhered to above all personal desires and wants. Frogs who lived without abiding by this were very rare, almost non-existent. This was why the saying, "the innocent frog's swordplay," existed. It referred to a frog, ignorant and deceived by humans or other races, selling their covenant and committing unwanted massacres with their sword.
That's quite something.
Enkrid realized once again that Luagern's mention of a vow was not something to be taken lightly. Was it really necessary? Making a vow of the heart to fall for him? Why? What was the point? Enkrid couldn't tell her to revoke it either. No fool was unaware of the weight of a frog's vow. He also knew well that frogs enjoyed lopping off the heads of those who insulted their vows. Fighting without losing and insulting an opponent were different matters, so Enkrid kept his mouth shut. At that moment, Esther, who had been curled up in exhaustion, suddenly let out a fierce cry.